Let's cut across to Shireen Bhan. She's in conversation with Amitabh Kant, the CEO of Niti Aayog.
Well, that's right. Joining us now is Mr. Amitabh Kant, the CEO of Niti Aayog, for the first reaction on the economic survey, which has been tabled in Parliament, the maiden economic survey of K.V. Subramaniam, the Chief Economic Advisor. Mr. Kant, thanks very much for joining us. You know, if I were to take a broad look at what the survey is sort of putting forward as the big idea through the course of this survey is investment. In fact, the survey says that there needs to be a virtuous cycle of savings, investment, exports and growth, with investments as the central driver. You know, littered with examples of what China and other East Asian economies did, especially on the export and the investment front. So in that context, and I know that Niti has been working on this area, you specifically have been working on this area. Realistically, what is the ask to unshackle the export sector? Surjit Bhalla's committee has given its recommendations, and what should we expect, sir, now from the government?
Shireen, very rightly, if the government is aiming at a $5 trillion economy by 24-25, and that's the ambition of the government, then your economy needs to grow at 8% plus consistently year after year for many years. And the challenge there is really that your investment rate must rise, your saving rates must rise, your exports must grow. But for exports to grow, you need to really push the manufacturing sector. That's the base on which exports work. And you need to get the size and scale right. And for all this to happen, to my mind, in the immediate run, is even if we hope for fresh investments, and FDI to come in, it takes a little time. And therefore, rightly, the government yesterday has approved what we've done through the process of asset recycling for airports. 3 airports, we had put out airports for bidding. And therefore, to my mind, for immediate kicking off of investments as well as credit cycle, the focus has to be on asset recycling, on disinvestments, and that will bring in big players because these are brownfield projects. They are fully de-risked. And you can get new models like InvITs to come in. So a whole range of potential is open in terms of gas pipeline.
I'm going to interrupt you, sir, because that is exactly corroborating the story that our colleague Anshu Sharma broke yesterday, that one of the big recommendations that the Niti has worked on, along with consultation with economists as well as industry leaders, is that there should be $100 billion in FDI that comes in by way of asset recycling, ports, power, transmission lines, airports, so on and so forth. Is that really the idea, that we can expect a roadmap, a blueprint to be laid out?
Well, I don't know what the blueprint would be. That nobody has a clue on that. That's for the finance minister to spell out. But if you look at it in the context of economic policy, in terms of raising investment levels, in terms of increasing savings, in terms of kickstarting the credit flow, because you need big players to come in and you need projects. At the end of the day, it's about brownfield projects being put out for bidding. And I think rightly the government put out airports, which is a very good model. And similarly, I think we need to do this in many, many more sectors and use different models to do this. And government is sitting on a lot of assets. We need to bring in greater productive efficiency in the economy. And this should really trigger economic growth in the long run.
Okay, so asset recycling is one of the immediate measures that the government can look at, and you said that you've started off with the 3 airports. There were 6 that had been cleared before the elections took place. Only 3 have been approved by cabinet yesterday. When can we expect the next 3?
So the other 3 have some minor legal issues which are being examined, and I think the Ministry of Civil Aviation is looking at sorting out those issues.
Okay, the ministry is looking at sorting out those issues. Let me also ask you, sir, now in terms of spurring investment, you know, what else would you believe are the immediate requirements? You know, we are seeing sort of interest rates reduce and the hope is that they will reduce further. But what can the government do? Forget what the RBI and the MPC can do, but what more can the government do, and what is the realistic expectation on the investment front?
So I'm a great believer in, as the Prime Minister has been saying repeatedly, that the government must get out of businesses. And there are vast possibility and potential of doing huge amount of disinvestment. The NITI has already recommended a large 50+ enterprises for disinvestment. We are going to recommend many more in due course, and our belief is that the more we push for disinvestment across public sector enterprises, the government in the long run will greatly benefit in terms of bringing in new investments in these sectors. You will see a huge amount of productive overall efficiency in the economy, and there is a need for government getting out into a huge range of areas, and the Prime Minister has repeatedly focused on it. In fact, the cabinet has approved already disinvestment in close to about 35 public sector enterprises. So there's political and administrative will to push ahead in a transparent, competitive manner on these sectors.
You're saying that there is...
But the other areas which I think, to my mind...
Yeah, just one second, sir. You're saying that there is political and administrative will to move ahead with strategic divestment. Cabinet has already approved 35, and the hope is that these will move faster. But there is also a separate plan on asset monetization that NITI has drawn up. Is there political and administrative will for the asset monetization plan as well, sir?
Why not? I mean, if the belief is that government must keep itself out of government and out of businesses, then there is surely a will, and that's why committees have been formed to go ahead with these. And in the short run, important thing, Shireen, is to really look at how do we ensure credit flow, how do we bring players into running and operating businesses, and how do we get a better value for government assets which can be better managed. I mean, why should mobile towers remain with BSNL and MTNL when every single other company has already leased them out or done an InvITs on them? Or similarly, InvITs across many other sectors. If we want to kickstart the capex cycle, that's the way to go forward.
Okay, InvITs across sectors is what you're suggesting. Why should the government hold on to BSNL and MTNL towers? When can we realistically expect this to kick off, sir? Because, you know, strategic disinvestment was cleared even in tenure 1 of the government. We didn't see it go through. If there is political and administrative will, what is the realistic timeline?
Shireen, it's very important when you're dealing with government assets that they must be done in an extremely transparent, competitive manner, and all procedures are completely complied with. We've seen earlier, during when the disinvestment was done, we go through a process of inquiries, etc. And therefore, it's very important that we complete the process. It's a little time taking, but I'm sure that the push that it is receiving will enable us to push ahead with this. But the important thing is that to push in savings and investment is really the key. And what the economic survey has talked about is really pushing exports. No country post-World War II has been able to grow at high rates of 8 to 9 or 10%. Japan, Korea, Taiwan, China in recent time all have grown on the back of exports. And therefore, driving exports is very, very critical for the economy. But we must understand, for driving exports, you need size and scale. You need to use the strength of the domestic market to provide impetus to exports. And therefore, size and scale requires to pick up 4 or 5 large areas and really push for them. And the second point I want to critically say is that quite often we in India get into sunset area of industries. It becomes very difficult to penetrate those areas because other countries have taken a lead. And therefore, we need to get into sunrise areas of industry and become global players. And to my mind, battery storage, electric mobility, many of these areas are really the sunrise areas of the future.
That is Amitabh Kant of Niti Aayog reiterating that asset recycling as well as divestment will be the way for the government to raise money, which will be needed for investments to kickstart the Indian economy. Let's get into a break on that note. On the other side, we'll take the discussion forward with Arvind Virmani, the chairman of Foundation for Economic Growth and Welfare, as well as Upasana Bharadwaj, the senior economist at Kotak Mahindra Bank.